record, and we're off. I look very dark today. I should have put more light on my face. Anyway, it's not about me. It's about Felicity. Hooray! Good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning. I'm fine, thank you.
You look perfectly well lit, and I'm just slightly distracted by your bookcase. You are typically in a vicarage with a whole wall full of books. Did they used to belong on the floor, dare I ask?
Yes, before lockdown, quite a few. There were piles, no? Handy ones, you know.
So the lockdown blessing has been finding your carpet again.
Yes, absolutely, and getting them in a bit of sort of sensible order, so I can find things more easily.
One of my friends, I think it might be Miranda, she decided to blitz her study by putting her books into colour combinations. So all the reds, all the oranges, all the yellows. I'm like, it's pretty, but how the heck are you going to find anything? You know, all the commentary is written by Tom Writer in red and blue, so that's fine. It was very pretty, but I think it would drive me mad after about probably a day. Felicity, tell me whereabouts in the world you are, what it is you were doing before lockdown changed everything, and who you've got at home with you.
Okay, I'm just outside Cambridge, 6 miles from Cambridge, in a rural area, nice rural area, South Cambs. Yeah. But, before lockdown, well, immediately before lockdown, I was on sabbatical from January.
Okay.
And in fact, I came back a week early because of all that was going on. And I'm rector of 5 parishes and rural dean. So,
okay. Each parish has its own church.
Yes.
Okay, and I'm guessing they're all of a certain age and they're a certain size.
They're all medieval.
Oh, glory be. Any of them listed? Any listed buildings in there?
Oh yes, all except one are listed.
Oh great, that's a whole bingo card filled out there, isn't it? And I'm guessing your congregations regular are of a certain age as well, a certain demographic in terms of age profile.
Largely, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. So maybe people should be staying indoors, but possibly aren't.
Yes, at least some of them.
And who have you got at home?
Varied. It's funny.
Yeah. Who have you got at home with you to keep you sane?
I live alone, human-wise, but I have a dog, a cat, and 2 chickens at the moment. Out in the garden, obviously.
Oh, lovely. So a cat who resents you coming home to their home, the dog who adores you for coming home to the home, and the chickens who just peck around the place going, who are you?
Yes, I had to go for a blood test a couple of weeks ago, and I said to the dog, as I put my shoes on, I'm going to work, you're staying here. And he looked at me like, what?
It's weird, isn't it? I do wonder if one of the difficulties of coming out of lockdown is suddenly there are cats who are rejoicing about getting their space back as people leave the house, and dogs who are going to mourn the loss of the human contact because they've had us with them for 14 weeks, and suddenly they're going, human, where are you going? Why are you abandoning me like this? And the chickens just don't care. They just carry on pecking regardless.
Absolutely.
So you were on sabbatical. You were having presumably a lovely time feeding your introvert self. You got a sniff towards the end of it of what was coming, having watched China and then Italy and then our own story unfold. So you came back a week early to get everything in place. A bit like trying to go on holiday, you have to get all the rotas in place, all the things in place. But what you need to do was come back off sabbatical and put the learning into practice, and suddenly everything changes. And on top of that, you've also got the fact that you are in the shielding category. So take us on that little journey of why shielding and that dual impact of not just preparing for lockdown, but being a shielding clergy as well.
I'm shielded because I have cancer of the bone marrow, which is one of those things that I've had it for 32 years. I live with it, you know. I'm on chemo, but you know, it's just there. You know, normally it doesn't impact my daily life really.
Yeah.
But of course, it's one of the things that was absolutely on the original list, and certainly my consultant supports that. So. Yeah. So I knew it was coming, and so that week between coming back and being shielded, the shielding starting, I was just dashing around everywhere trying to do everything and get displays up, and you know,
exhausting.
And interestingly, see, I wasn't worried then particularly.
Okay.
It felt like the shielding was being sort of imposed, so I'd have to do it. But I wasn't sort of thinking I need to do it at that stage. Yeah.
I know those first few weeks of lockdown, I guess having to take on and learn a whole new set of skills, because it wasn't just about closing buildings, it was about moving church somewhere else, the online space. And I felt there was a massive pressure, either self-imposed or from the outside, that suddenly we had to be celebrity vicars online, getting church completely right. But a lot of people didn't have the tech or the broadband to do that. How was it for you moving everything online?
Oh, it was a really steep learning curve. I knew how to do what I knew how to do, you know, what I needed to do in my normal life, and suddenly I needed to do so much more. And to start with, I put videos on Facebook because that was the best I could manage, knowing that there were people who wouldn't access Facebook, but I was also trying to do other things. So I made a stupid decision right at the beginning that every day I would put a thought on the website. Not necessarily a very theological thought, and it might be just a cartoon I'd found, or something that made me smile or laugh, is what smile or cry is what I put on the website as I do. Every day that soon became, I would sit there in the morning and think, what am I going to do today?
No, and I think probably because at the beginning, I don't know about you, but we all thought it would be over fairly quickly. I remember at the beginning of March, or maybe the second week of March, my mum and dad were meant to be coming to see us. At the end of April, they booked a hotel, and we had that conversation on about the 20th of March and said, well, what do we do about the 26th of April? Do we keep the hotel booking? Do you still come and see us? And they said, I think we're going to cancel it because I think we won't be out of it by then. And we're like, isn't that just a bit pessimistic? So they cancelled the hotel. And of course, blame me, here we are in June, nearly July, and it's still here. So I guess those early weeks we made promises of, I'll do this, I'll do that. It'll only last a month. Yeah. And then a few weeks in going, this is going to be a longer haul than I expected. Is that how you felt?
Absolutely, yeah, yes. And in fact, last week I made the decision that I would only do it Tuesdays, Thursdays and Saturdays. So I cut
just
it
spread it out. Yeah.
Yes.
I think we ended up doing more on the online space than possibly we would have done in that same teaching capacity in the offline space. Our time may have been spent doing pastoral visits and what have yous, and now they weren't. But I think we seem to end up doing more teaching, more preaching, more interaction online than we ever had offline. And it's actually a very different skill set and quite exhausting in those early weeks.
Yes, and ringing people.
Oh, yeah, go
on. Ringing people. I decided I needed to ring everybody. I didn't ring. I haven't rung everybody because some people have had email contact, and that's fine, and I know they're okay. It was interesting because a couple of weeks in, I sent an update to all the church wardens, and in towards the end of that, I said I am ringing people, but if there's somebody you think I should ring, let me know. And somebody immediately came back and said, "Oh, could you ring Fred?" So I was quite happy to ring Fred. Fred is 98, and I rang Fred, and he said, "Oh, lovely to hear from you. You're the 7th person who's rung me today." Of course, that's what was happening. So I was trying to ring the people, the 50-year-old who normally works in Cambridge, long hours, doesn't really know anybody in the village much, that sort of thing, but is living alone and is suddenly on their own. So I was trying to think a bit more out of the box about who to contact. But really and truly, I found I could only ring 2 or 3 people a day for those sorts of contacts, because it takes quite a lot out of you, doesn't it?
Particularly if in a rural context, what we're more used to do is bumping into people on the street or in the post office or the shop or the pub, if we're lucky enough to still have those in our villages, in our rural context. So the bumping into casual conversations where you can just check someone's okay, are the norm. a phone call, there's a lot that goes on with it. Shall I ring them? Is it okay to ring them now? Am I going to be interrupting them? Is it going to be okay? Am I going to have to listen to their voice and work out whether they are okay or not? It's a whole different skill set, and it relies on intentionality rather than bumping into your relationship. Yeah, it's a different way of being a priest. And as a shielder, of course, you couldn't really just wander around the village with a mask on, waving at people and through their windows going, are you okay? Because you had to stay inside. So I know you're an introvert, but there does come a point where your own company is probably too much, and you, a feeling of, other priests have said they felt guilty about the fact that they physically couldn't go and socially distance visit through windows because they had to stay indoors. I don't know how you felt about the imposed incarceration in your vicarage.
Oh yes, the biggest guilt was around funerals and bereavement generally. And that was huge. Yeah, has been huge all the way along. Very quickly, very early on, we had a couple of funerals come in, and both my associate priest and my experienced LLM were self-isolating. So the only person I had was my new LLM. The poor woman. We did a sort of distanced training of what to do, and it was really hard on her, but I also found it really hard, and just that whole thing of, you talk to somebody on the phone and you'd know that, if you were there with them, you wouldn't necessarily give them a great big hug, but you might touch their hand, or and all those things that you can't do at the moment. So I found that really hard. The hardest, the really awful one, was that somebody arrived at my door one evening. Absolutely, she had been crying so long and so hard that she was at that shuddery stage. And she was standing outside my window with me the other side of the window, with her dog on her lead. And she was a health worker. I didn't know her at all. I'd never seen her before. And she was just totally unable to cope at that moment with what had been happening. And the number of people she had seen dead and die, and her difficulties about coping with telling families and that sort of thing. And I just felt awful. It's so not how you do it. And at one point she put her hand on the window. I just put my hand in. I mean, it was just horrible. It was,
and it has to be good enough, but it just feels, we're not trained for this, are we? This isn't part of our funeral training. And I know you can't train for the unexpected, but it's such a massive learning curve. And trying to train your LLM in standard funerals is one thing, but having to go, okay, I don't know, let's just try and work it out as we go along. Good luck, I'm praying for you. It's a huge thing to carry. Have you found being on your own has been, other folks I've known around the country who live alone have said they found it really hard because they want the hugs, they want the human contact. Others have said they've loved being on their own because it gives them permission to be hermits. Others have said, oh, it must be great for you, Katie, because you've got a husband and kid. And I'm like, yeah, but seeing the same faces every single day is quite intense, and I kind of want to see other people. How have you found being on your own to be either a gift or a curse in terms of shielding and enforced isolation, and maybe from colleagues and wider clergy support groups?
It's been difficult at times. I mean, it's been very up and down all the way through, I think. There have been good days and bad days, and harder days. I am an introvert, and I am used to being on my own. But I'm also, I don't know if you do Myers-Briggs, I'm also really high F. So I need people from that point of view. I need people to F with, if you like. And so I have missed that, and I've tried to encourage people sometimes. I've had to ask. It's been quite hard. Again, that's another hard thing for me. It's been having to ask people to do things or ask for help. It's been easier to ask people to take, the messy church bags to the next village than it is, obviously, than it's to do stuff for me. But but even so, it's still quite hard. And I've tried to encourage the people who have come to collect the messy church bags for the next village to actually at least have a little chat outside the window whilst they're there.
Because just sit in the back and run away. It's just stay and have a little chat about life and stuff. Make it a bit normal.
Yes, because some people, they've dropped something off or they've picked up post or something and they've not rung the bell. Unfortunately, I've got a Labrador who's pretty good as a doorbell, but I'd sort of see them disappearing and sort of like, oh, hello. So yeah, that at times has been hard. Initially, it was interesting because initially, although I knew I'd be shielded right from the beginning, and it took 3 weeks to get my letter, I guess, but I also didn't seem to get on the right list. I mean, this whole thing about this list, it's not run smoothly. No, so I couldn't get a supermarket delivery. And I wasn't getting the boxes at that stage. So, and neighbours and people were great and would say, oh, I'm going to Waitrose, do you want anything? Or I've got Tesco's coming, do you want anything? And that's fine. But I was doing a wedding couple Zoom at one point early on. And I said to them, the trouble is, you can't, everybody's really good, but the trouble is you can't ask them to bring you chocolate and Pringles, really, because it's not exactly essential, is it? And a couple of weeks later, they arrived on the doorstep with chocolate and Pringles.
They're worth their weight in gold. They're keepers, those two. Yeah, you want to hang on to them. You're right, isn't it? You feel you can ask for things like bread and milk because everyone knows that's fine. But if you say, and actually the things that I really, really need are the treats to keep my mental health going, and you feel like you ought to not ask them in case people are like, oh, that's a bit extravagant. You should be lucky to get the bread and milk. Yeah, thanks. So did you get the food boxes in the end?
Well, yes, about a month ago. No, less than that, probably. About a month ago. I suddenly started getting food boxes. And it's sort of like, and it was really, I managed this week, Wednesday, I caught him because they seem to do a sort of drop and run.
Yeah, they're just like ding dong, and they're just really gone. And you're like, I don't want 9 bags of pears anymore. Stop sending me weird stuff.
I did think in my box, well, I thought about 2 things. One is, if I really had needed that box 2 months in, I'd have been really hungry. But the other thing I thought about my box was that if you didn't like tomato, you'd be really stuck, because I had 2 tins of tomato soup, 2 tins of baked beans, meatballs in tomato.
Yeah, there's a lot in tomato sauce, wasn't there? I really hate tomatoes, but I don't mind them disguised as other things. So baked beans I'm okay with and things, but anything that tastes of tomato and is undisguised, I'm a bit of a, but it's my husband who's shielding, so I give him the box and go, well, that's your food box, and I'll be on to Tesco now and getting the deliveries. We ended up giving our food box to the food bank down the road because we kept ringing the government, the phone line up and going, actually, we've managed to wangle our way by sitting up at midnight as the thing clicks over to get Sainsbury's and Tesco delivery. So by hook and by crook, we've managed to get ourselves on the list to have deliveries. And we rang up the food box people and said, we don't need this now. We've managed to get ourselves into a different system. So other people had food boxes. It took 3 weeks for them to stop delivering the food box. The food bank did really well out of us. They came and collected it from the doorstep and they're like, oh, thanks, more pears. Yeah, I hope you like pears, because we don't. So it was an interesting experience. And then coming out of lockdown, and I know that some of it has been by practice rather than policy. I don't know about you, but it felt like at the beginning of lockdown, we were all in it together, shielders, isolators, social distancers. The whole country was all restricting necessarily, because policy said we should, and practice followed, and we did, and we were in it together. It feels to me as though the ending of lockdown has been practical ending first, policy catching up, and shielders somewhere at the end of the queue for attention and care and risk management. Has lockdown felt differently at this end of it for you?
Yeah. I am much, I mean, as I said, I wasn't particularly anxious at the beginning, but I am anxious now.
Yeah.
I'm anxious that I'm suddenly going to be expected to take funerals and, that sort of thing, and go into people's homes where I don't know how safe they are, and yeah, so I am anxious, and it does feel like others have sort of moved on. Yeah, and I mean, up till now, I mean, I was desperate to get the churches opened again, because the person who was really distraught who arrived had said she spent the previous 2 evenings sitting against the church wall as the closest she could get, and she said, and I'm an atheist.
Oh gosh, okay.
So I was desperate about the fact that we knew that a lot of the people that go to church for solace or sanctuary or just a bit of peace, were not necessarily people we knew. So they weren't getting any of the other things that we were doing.
Yeah.
So I was really pleased that we could open up churches, and we managed that. I did risk assessments on Zoom with the church wardens, and other people did the practical things.
Yeah.
But again, there's another guilt. I'm asking other people to go in and clean, and normally I'd be in there with them.
Yeah, but you can't. Yeah.
Yeah. But now we come to restarting services, that is going to be much harder.
More risk assessments to do, 30 odd pages of risk assessment, and I guess I know some of the bigger churches have got people now ringing up and going, I can have the baptism of my child now, and they're having to go, no, we are opening, but we are not open for business as we were before. This is a whole different level of being open, and I'm not sure everyone quite understands that you can open from the 4th of July, but it will look very different if you do. I guess the shielding clergy, that again, that renewed sense of guilt of, if everyone wants the church to open and be as it was from the 4th of July, and shielders are meant to stay put until the 1st of August, that's a whole month of wondering what's the best thing to do for everybody involved, and a pressure from different points of view. And you've got 5 buildings, of course, to work out which one to open and how to do it. Yeah,
including one very complicated one, but that's the one that isn't open yet. Complicated because it's in a national trust. It's right in the middle of a national trust property.
Oh wow, okay.
And the
so
national
that's got a whole other level of bureaucracy to discuss.
Absolutely. So, unfortunately, they're not pushing too hard. So we're I'm just sort of thinking, right, we'll leave that one at the moment, concentrate on the others. But normally the pattern would be, some on one Sunday a month in particular, I would do an 8:15, 9:30, 11, and a 6, and it's sort of like, with the extra things in place, I'm not sure that's sensible or possible.
And I think lockdown has given us permission as priests to look at what we did before and to say, actually, having none of that now, what actually has to be picked up again when places reopen? And I would always argue, and I've been there and done it, the 8:15, 9:30, 11 and half 6 is simply not sustainable. It's conveyor belt worship. And the risk is it lacks meaning for us as priests, because we're just doing and crashing. And it kind of begs the question, if that wasn't sustainable but we did it, and it wasn't meaningful but we had to, do we have to pick that up again when we reopen? And if we don't, those are tough conversations to have. People who said, oh, can we go back to doing that? And going, actually no, because it was conveyor belt worship for us and it wasn't what it should be for you. But not being an incumbent anymore, I can lean back and go, oh good, that's one less conversation I got to have with people. I got different setups, so it's different. Have you found God to be nearer, further, more talkative, less talkative in all this?
It's sort of varied. One of my ways of prayer has always been walking. And although I have still been able to go out, it's early in the morning out the back, it's been limited. So I've sort of lost that option a bit. And I've also lost, as you know, sometimes when you're leading worship, it isn't always as prayerful as if you're experiencing it. It's one of the reasons why it's nice as a priest to sometimes not be in the congregation. But because we're recording our service, we're not live streaming, and because I live alone, I've I felt less like I'm worshipping when I'm recording the service.
Yeah.
I mean, I do then say it, but I say it goes out there, it's on YouTube, and it's the idea is that I will say it at 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning with anyone who wants to do it then, and others can do it whenever suits them. So there is a sense that I hope to get that gathered bit, but it's not, I've missed that.
Yeah.
I in fact, moving into the lockdown a few weeks, I belonged to a church in Cambridge as a congregation member. I belonged to an open table service, which I would usually go to physically if I could. Yeah. And so they started having Zoom services, and I attended, and that felt much better. Because it felt like we were together. And at that point I started having, although we have YouTube services still for our Sunday morning, we started having some Zoom services as well.
Sure, it's more relational, isn't it, than it's because the difficulty or the possible difficulty of the pre-record is from the person who's doing the pre-record point of view. It can feel like you're presenting to an empty room and you're wondering if anyone will be listening at the time, never mind the fact that as a pre-record, there's no one listening apart from you and God. Yeah, although God's there, which is nice, at least 4 people are present. Whereas on Zoom, the challenge of that is, although it is more relational visually, if visual things are okay, but the cross-pollination of cross-chatting can be quite frustrating, and there's no kind of one-size-fits-all, a bit like offline church. There's no one building that works for everybody. We have to muddle along and do our best, and it's trying to find where the gaps are and work out how to make them better, whether it's offline or online, and trying to make sure that God is allowed to be present, even if he decides to wander off and do something else. At least we've made that opportunity for God to be present with us, rather than things in his way.
Yes, I guess.
Difficult, isn't it? Top tips. What's got you through this, apart from wholesale chocolate that I know Rachel Knoll in the first interview was talking about getting it wholesale, and you went, well, I could do that. So I'd eat it all. So apart from wholesale chocolate, apart from the lovely chickens who have wisdom of pecking, and your cat who, like most cats, just goes, oh yeah, and the dog who's pleased to see everybody comes to the door, being a Labrador. What top tips have you got, things that have helped you through this that other people might hear and go, actually, I might try that?
I think actually making sure there's time for me every day. Initially I said, right, I'm going to spend half an hour in the garden every day. And most days I did. Yeah. There were a couple of, some days couldn't make it, but also lately the other thing I've done more is I've actually turned the computer off. Early evening, which normally I don't do. Normally I'm afraid I'll just go and see if, or I'll just go and do, and I'm really bad at that. So
then you get absorbed in something else. You hear the ping of the email and you go, I'll just answer that, and then something catches your eye, and then you go on Facebook, and then you go and look at something, and it's an hour later, and you're like, oh, the screen again. Yeah.
So I've done that. That's there have been, I know somebody else you interviewed has said about days where you didn't do anything, and I had one a couple of days ago, and I don't like those sorts of days where I end up at I just feel really dissatisfied. I feel like all I've done all day is eat and play Candy Crush Saga.
It's probably not a bad thing now and again, but not every day.
Well, yeah, and not having anything to show for it. I think it's, for me, maybe that's just my personality. I like to feel like, well, at least I've been able, I could tick that off. If I put it on the list, I could tick it off.
Being productive, something to show for it and go, I've done this and this is what happened as a result, rather than I played Candy Crush and ate chocolate.
Yeah, quite. Yes.
Sounds good. So having a kind of a regular rhythm to the day, but being kind if it doesn't go that way, and occasionally having a no rhythm day to let you have permission to do nothing. But for you, that's not as helpful because you want something to show for it at the end of the day, other than a larger waistline and a sore thumb from playing Candy Crush.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's all those
Awesome.
things.
So things that are health giving rather than health stripping.
Yes. Yes. I have read a bit more.
Well, I'm going to say hopefully not theological books. Hopefully you've read something that hasn't been work.
No, I have. I joined Kindle Unlimited, so I managed to get.
So what have you been reading that you've really been engrossed by that you would recommend to other people?
Well, I found a new author on when I joined Kindle Unlimited. I found a new author, L.R. Ross, Louise Ross, who writes detective stories, and being a bit sad, really. I was attracted to them because the first one was set on Holy Island.
Oh, that's ideal.
But actually, I mean, they're a bit, standard sort of. But I love finding a new author who's done a series, because then you know that you've got all those that you can still read.
Yeah, it's not you get to the end of a book and going, I love that. Where's the next one? And then going, oh, they only read one book. Oh, that's annoying. So yeah, to know that there's a series is quite, particularly if you like the first one, to know there's more coming is great. My son's been reading the Narnia stories, and he devours books. We've got to the end of each one and gone, right, I'm going to get the next one. It's like, pace yourself. I know there's 7. Pace yourself, otherwise you'll read them all in a week. So, and he's loved reading those. And he's now reading Harry Potter and watching the films. So he reads a book, watches the film, and then dissects which one he liked better and why. So that's been something that's been good for him. A bit of structure for him as well. Yeah. Fabulous. So don't eat much chocolate. Don't play Candy Crush every day. Do things that give you health and joy. Find a new author to immerse yourself in. That sounds good to me. Awesome. Felicity, you have been an absolute star. It's been lovely to meet you, and I look forward to that moment where we get to meet each other's pooches in real life. I get to meet your Labrador, and you get to meet my lurcher, and I get to meet your chickens. I like the idea of chickens, although I don't like the idea of picking up all after their poo and stuff. But my landlord wouldn't let us have chickens anyway, so it's disappointing. But I hope the rest of your day is fabulous. Thank you so much for being one of my lovely interviewees. And we'll do that awkward waving thing that everyone's at the end of Zoom. We'll wave goodbye to each other. I will press stop recording.